They say payback tastes best on ice, but sometimes it's served at 3 a.m. with a convoy of wreckers. Picture this. You bolt upright to the harsh stench of hot tar clawing at your sinuses. Your private gravel drive, the one you shelled out $80,000 for precisely to dodge HOA meddling, has been blacktopped in the dark without consent. Your fence posts lie scattered like busted molars. Your survey stakes smashed into scrap. Then comes the letter. The HOA president actually invoices you $3,200 for this community upgrade and demands monthly upkeep. The smugness drips off the page as she explains how your rustic lane needed proper standards. What she didn't realize, I'm a retired commercial developer with a quiet towing agreement covering every impound yard in the county. By sunrise, every single vehicle belonging to her little HOA inner circle had vanished, as if the earth swallowed them. What would you do if someone wrecked your property overnight? Where are you tuning in from? And what's your worst HOA nightmare? My name's Caleb Ridgway, and 3 years ago I thought I'd found heaven. After selling my concrete contracting company in Dallas, my wife Maya and I bought our dream spread, 3 acres of rolling Texas hill country along the edge of Briarwood Commons. The house sat 400 yards off the main road, linked by a beautiful gravel drive that crunched under tires like breakfast cereal and naturally kept speeds down. Here's the key detail that saved my sanity and my wallet. I bought the access road separately. Not part of the subdivision, not under HOA covenants, completely private. The previous owner, Harold Benton, was a sharp old rancher who carved out that access in 1987 specifically to avoid neighborhood politics. I paid an extra $80,000 for that privilege, worth every cent. Maya's a high school principal, practical, grounded, with a laugh that can dissolve any argument. Our daughter Nina was 15, locked in on college prep and allergic to teenage drama. We moved here for peace, privacy, and the kind of quiet family time you can't buy in town. Every evening, we'd sit on the back porch listening to mockingbirds while the sweet scent of Maya's jasmine drifted across the yard. Enter Sloan Whitaker, the human embodiment of a parking citation. Imagine the most entitled real estate agent you've ever met. Multiply by 10, then hand her a gavel and an HOA presidency. Sloan drove a white BMW X5 with vanity plates reading Prop QN. And yes, she thought that was clever. She'd run the HOA for 3 years, suing a dozen neighbors for infractions ranging from non-conforming mailbox paint to excessive bird feeder activity. The woman measured lawn height with an actual ruler. I'm not kidding. She carried it in her handbag like other people carry breath mints. The trouble kicked off on a Tuesday morning in March. I was savoring my coffee when the growl of heavy equipment shattered our quiet routine. Outside my kitchen window, a crew was laying fresh asphalt over my carefully maintained gravel lane. The bitter blend of hot tar and diesel punched my nose as the reality hit. The foreman, when confronted, flashed a work order signed by Sloan. Community Access Improvement Project, Briarwood Grand Entrance. My fence posts had been yanked like weeds and tossed in a heap. The metal survey markers I'd paid to install professionally were gone, hammered into twisted shards. Where my private road met the subdivision's entry, they'd set decorative stone pillars with brass plaques reading Briarwood Commons Grand Entrance S 2023. They were literally paving over my rights. I stormed to the HOA office in the strip mall down the road, boots still dusted with crushed rock. Sloan sat behind her desk like a monarch in session, framed by real estate trophies and community service plaques. Her smile could slice glass, and her perfume hung in the air like expensive gilt. "We're bringing your rustic access up to community standards," she said, stretching rustic as if it were contagious. She slid over an enlarged plat with my road highlighted in yellow and labeled Future Community Thoroughfare. The previous owner verbally agreed to eventual road sharing, she claimed. No paperwork, of course, just her word against a dead rancher's. The next day brought a certified letter on official HOA letterhead. $3,200 assessment for road enhancement. $85 monthly in upkeep. 30-day notice to install appropriate community standard landscaping. The kicker: threats of liens and legal action for non-compliance. Maya was livid. I could hear cabinet doors clap from 3 rooms away. Nina's classmates immediately started treating our new blacktop like a parking strip and skateboard course, their wheels buzzing past our bedroom window every morning at 7. But here's what Sloan didn't know. Harold Benton had packed our deed with language that would make her attorneys wish they'd never seen my address. Sloan didn't pause to savor her stunt. Within a week, she'd set those decorative entrance markers where my land touched the subdivision. Brass plaques gleamed in the morning light. Briarwood Commons. Grand entrance. Established 2023. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd literally branded my driveway as community property. But that still wasn't enough. Next came the security outfit. A uniformed guard in a golf cart started patrolling what Sloan now called the community thoroughfare. Tuesday morning, I'm heading to town for supplies when this rent-a-cop flags me at the end of my own drive. "Sir, I need to see some ID and verify authorization to use this community access road." The metallic tang of pure fury rose in my mouth. "This is my property," I said, keeping my voice even. "That's my house right there." He shrugged. "Ma'am says all vehicles need verification. Community safety protocols." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of being carted to reach my own home. But this was serious. Back in my building days, I'd seen developers run this exact play, create a fait accompli, then use security theater to bully owners into surrender. The technical term is extortion, though Sloan probably called it enhancement. I filed a complaint with the county planning office the next morning. Here's what most folks don't realize about construction. Everything needs permits. Everything. You can't pour a sidewalk, reroute a swale, or install signage without paperwork. Sloan's crew had blown through at least 3 municipal codes I could list in my sleep. County records confirmed it. 0 permits for any road work in our area. Within 48 hours, a bright orange stop work order was stapled to Sloan's pretty new pillars. Seeing that notice flap in the Texas breeze felt better than Christmas morning. Sloan's reply was swift and predictably petty. Emergency HOA board meeting Friday night. I wasn't invited, obviously, but my neighbor Owen Briggs, a retired Marine with excellent hearing and a gift for evening dog walks, happened to pass the clubhouse around meeting time. According to Owen, Sloan spent an hour ranting about how I was obstructing community progress and tanking property values. The board then voted unanimously to fine me $500 per day for failure to maintain common area. She was literally fining me for not tending my own private road to her standards. The chutzpah was almost admirable. The certified letter landed Monday morning, officially declaring me persona non grata in my own neighborhood. I'd been banned from a place I legally owned. Even the postal clerk looked ashamed handing it over. But Sloan was just warming up the psychological warfare. She launched what she called a community awareness campaign, which basically turned my neighbors into an unpaid PR arm. The script was simple. Caleb Ridgway's gravel road endangers school buses, and his legal obstruction will sink everyone's home values. Maya came back from grocery shopping shaken after 3 neighbors cornered her with concerned warnings about my alleged legal mess. The familiar lavender of her shampoo was drowned out by stress sweat from that ambush. "They made it sound like you're some kind of criminal," Maya said, hands trembling as she unpacked the bags. Janelle Morrison even asked if we were having money problems and needed to sell. While Sloan played neighborhood politics, I was playing a longer game, and I knew exactly where this was heading. I called my former business partner Luis Delgado, now a traffic engineering consultant, and ordered a professional land survey with GPS coordinates. Cost? $3,200, exactly what Sloan was trying to bill me for destroying my property. Poetic justice has a price tag. I also reached out to Wade Callahan, a retired sheriff's deputy turned private investigator. Wade had a knack for digging up public records people preferred stayed buried. Within 3 days, he uncovered something fascinating. Sloan had been quietly buying up surrounding parcels through shell companies for 18 months. The pieces began falling into place. I remembered reading about something called prescriptive easement during my contractor days, the legal theory that long-term use can establish property rights. But it requires 10+ years of continuous documented use. Sloan would need to prove the community had been using my road since 2013, which was mathematically impossible since I'd gated it every winter until 2019. I had receipts for everything: gate installation, private property signage, snowplowing contracts that explicitly excluded community vehicles. Harold Benton had done the same thing every winter since 1987. Sloan's historical usage claims were about as sturdy as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. The mini twist came Friday afternoon via certified mail from Benton Howe LLP. Ironically, the same law firm that handled my business sale 3 years ago. They knew I had money, which made their cease and desist letter especially bold. They claimed my survey stakes constituted destruction of community property and threatened a $50,000 lawsuit plus attorney fees. The irony was delicious, threatening to sue me for surveying my own land while defending someone who had actually destroyed it. That weekend, Maya found me in the garage organizing files and chuckled. "You look like a general planning a campaign." "Funny you should say that," I replied, pulling out Harold Benton's carefully crafted deed restrictions. "Because that's exactly what this is." Sloan clearly decided subtlety was for amateurs. Her next move was pure psychological warfare disguised as community engagement. She organized daily beautification walks, groups of 8 to 10 HOA loyalists strolling past our house with the casual intensity of a military patrol. They'd linger, snapping photos on their phones, pointing at our landscaping and whispering among themselves like suburban paparazzi. The clicking shutters became our new morning soundtrack, replacing the bird song we'd moved here to enjoy. Sloan herself led these expeditions, clipboard in hand, documenting what she called safety violations and code infractions. Nina started closing her bedroom curtains during the day. "It's like living in a fishbowl," she complained. And she wasn't wrong. The Facebook posts started appearing that afternoon. Photos of our perfectly ordinary house with passive-aggressive captions like "interesting landscaping choices" and "wonder if this meets fire safety standards." The comments devolved into digital lynch mobs debating everything from our mailbox color to Maya's garden gnomes. But Sloan's bureaucratic masterpiece was yet to come. Somehow, the county planning office had suddenly lost my original survey documents. The new clerk, a young woman who looked suspiciously like Sloan's mini-me and conveniently shared her last name, claimed there was no record of my permits or property boundaries. "You'll need to reapply for a driveway access permit," she said with a smile, cold enough to freeze hell. "The filing fee is $2,800, and the process usually takes 6 to 8 months." During which time she explained, with obvious satisfaction, my road access would be questionable under county regulations. I'd dealt with enough municipal corruption in my construction years to recognize a shakedown when I saw one. This wasn't bureaucracy. It was extortion with a government stamp. While I drowned in red tape, Wade earned every dollar of his investigative fee. His background check on Sloan revealed something that made my blood run cold. She'd been assembling a property empire through shell companies like some kind of suburban real estate vampire. 6 different LLCs, all under her control, had purchased parcels surrounding my land over the past 18 months. Wade's aerial photos told the story clearly. Sloan now owned land on 3 sides of my property. Her grand plan wasn't about road access. It was about assembling luxury estate lots by merging smaller parcels. My 3-acre Keystone parcel was the only thing standing between her and a multi-million-dollar development deal. Back in my contractor days, I'd seen developers use this exact strategy, called assemblage, where they quietly buy up adjacent parcels to create larger development tracts. The last holdout always faces the heaviest pressure, because without their cooperation, the entire investment collapses. That's when the sabotage began. Thursday morning brought the acrid smell of dying St. Augustine grass and wilted rose bushes. Our irrigation system had failed during a brutal Texas heat wave. When I traced the problem, I found that someone had deliberately cut our main water line where it crossed under the new asphalt, with surgical precision. Before I could even call a plumber, my phone rang. "Mr. Ridgway," came Sloan's voice, dripping with mock concern. "I understand you're planning to destroy community infrastructure. That will require board approval and a $5,000 damage deposit. The woman had sabotaged my property, then tried to extort me for fixing her damage. It was like being mugged by someone who then offers to sell you a bandage at premium prices." Benton Howe escalated that same week, filing a preliminary injunction to stop me from interfering with community road maintenance. They wanted a judge to order the immediate removal of my survey stakes and private property signs claiming they were harassing HOA members. I recognized the tactic from countless construction disputes. Tie property owners up in costly legal battles while continuing the very behavior you're being sued over. It's a strategy designed to drain your wallet before the real fight even begins. But something encouraging was happening in the neighborhood. Not everyone was sipping Sloane's Kool-Aid. Owen Briggs, the retired Marine, quietly offered security cameras. Dr. Linda Perez shared horror stories that made my situation look like amateur hour. Janet Lewis, a teacher with organizational skills that would make the Pentagon jealous, revealed Sloane had tried to lowball her corner lot for half its value. When Janet refused, her garbage collection mysteriously started skipping every other week. The pattern was unmistakable. Sloane wasn't just targeting me, she was systematically harassing anyone who wouldn't sell. The tax bombshell landed that Friday afternoon. The county had reappraised my property based on the road improvements, bumping my annual taxes from $4,200 to $7,800. The appeals process required paying the disputed amount up front, another financial pressure tactic. That evening, Maya and I sat on our back porch watching the sunset through a haze of construction dust and exhaust. Our once peaceful evenings now carried the constant rumble of traffic and the shouts of teenagers, treating our community road like a personal skate park. "She's getting desperate," Maya observed, watching another group of HOA supporters photograph our house from the road. "Good," I replied, texting Wade for an update. "Desperate people make stupid mistakes." Sloane's next act was pure theater disguised as diplomacy. She arranged what she called an informal mediation session at the county commissioner's office. The invitation came on official letterhead, my first red flag. In my construction days, any meeting labeled informal usually meant someone was about to get formally screwed. I walked into that conference room expecting a reasonable discussion, and instead found myself facing something that looked like a corporate takeover meeting. 12 HOA board members, Sloane's attorney, and a presentation binder thick enough to stop a bullet. The commissioners looked like hostages at their own meeting, while Sloane launched into a PowerPoint on community impact assessment. Her proposal was mathematically insulting. I should sell my road easement to the HOA for $15,000. $15,000 for property worth at least $80,000. She was essentially asking me to pay her for the privilege of being legally mugged. "This is a generous offer, considering the legal complications your obstruction has created," Sloane said, sliding the folder across the table like she was offering me the deal of a lifetime. The scent of her expensive perfume couldn't mask the stench of desperation filling the room. I stood, straightened my jacket, and delivered what I hoped was a dignified response. "I'll consider your offer right after you consider my counter-proposal of $0 and a public apology." Then I walked out, leaving them to explain to the commissioners why they'd wasted everyone's time with legal theater. The real war began the next week with a front-page newspaper article. Property dispute splits Briarwood community. Sloane had clearly spent hours coaching the reporter, painting herself as a reasonable leader dealing with one selfish neighbor blocking progress. I got exactly one paragraph to defend myself, buried on page 2 between a bake sale announcement and a lost dog notice. The aerial photo they ran was a propaganda masterpiece. My home, looking like a stubborn island surrounded by modern progress. The online comments section became a digital gladiator pit where neighbors I'd never met debated my character, my finances, and Maya's choice of garden decorations. While Sloane played media mogul, I was quietly assembling my counterattack. Those trail cameras Owen had installed were better than Christmas morning. Over 3 weeks, they captured footage of Sloane's crew pulling out my survey markers at 2 a.m., dumping construction debris on my land, and my personal favorite, her security guard harassing Nina and her friends while they checked the mailbox. But Sloane's psychological warfare was expanding beyond property lines. My homeowners insurance company suddenly discovered that increased traffic created commercial liability exposure and demanded an extra $4,000 per year, based on an anonymous complaint about unsafe conditions. Back in my contractor years, I learned that when someone tries to wreck your financial stability from multiple angles at once, they're working from a playbook. This wasn't random harassment, it was a coordinated campaign designed to force a quick sale. The workplace intimidation confirmed my suspicions. Maya came home pale and shaken after an informal chat with a school board member who lived in our subdivision. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint suggesting her husband's hostile legal behavior might reflect poorly on her judgment as an educator. I'd seen this tactic in labor disputes. When you can't break someone directly, you target their family's livelihood. What Sloan didn't realize was that workplace intimidation falls under federal civil rights law when used to coerce property transactions. She was accidentally building my lawsuit for me. Her legal Hail Mary came through a city planning petition to reclassify my road as a public thoroughfare. If successful, the city could seize it via eminent domain for token compensation. Maybe $1, like those infamous cases where governments grabbed private land for public projects. The public hearing was set for the following month, giving Sloan time to pack the room with angry neighbors demanding I sacrifice my property rights for their convenience. But my secret weapon was gaining strength. Dr. Perez had been quietly digging into property law and sharing legal precedents that made Sloan's case look like Swiss cheese. Owen provided military-grade documentation of every harassment incident. Janet had launched a social media counter-campaign exposing Sloan's shell company acquisitions. Wade's financial deep dive revealed the smoking gun. Sloan was hemorrhaging cash faster than a broken hydrant. Her shell companies owed $340,000 to multiple lenders. Her credit cards were maxed at $67,000, and her real estate license was under state investigation for undisclosed conflicts of interest. The woman was 90 days from bankruptcy unless she flipped enough properties to cover her gambling losses. My refusal to sell wasn't just blocking her development dream, it was threatening her financial survival. Friday brought the utility warfare. Anonymous complaints about my power lines crossing community property triggered an $8,500 relocation study demand. My internet mysteriously failed that same week, requiring costly repairs beneath the new asphalt. That evening, Maya found a note tucked under her windshield at school. "Stop your husband before this gets worse." She handed it to me with steady hands, but I saw the fear behind her eyes. "She's getting desperate." "Good," I replied, snapping a photo of the note. Desperate people make career-ending mistakes. Sometimes the most crucial discoveries hide in the least likely places. Wade found our smoking gun deep in the courthouse basement, buried in a filing cabinet that probably hadn't been opened since the Reagan era. The musty smell of decades-old paper made him sneeze for an hour. But what he uncovered was worth every sniffle. Harold Benton, that brilliant old rancher, had been playing four-dimensional chess back in 1987. The original deed restrictions contained language that would make any property lawyer tear up with joy. Access road shall remain private property in perpetuity, not subject to any homeowner association covenants, assessments, or interference whatsoever. In perpetuity, forever, until the stars burn out or Texas freezes over. The document was notarized, filed in triplicate, and cross-referenced with the county surveyor's office. Harold had specifically included wording to block any future HOA claims, describing it colorfully as protection against neighborhood busybody interference with a man's God-given right to drive on his own damn land. I was ready to build a shrine to that cantankerous cowboy. But Wade's corporate investigation revealed something even more explosive. Those shell companies weren't just buying properties, they were borrowing massive sums using projected HOA income as collateral. Briarwood Development Partners had borrowed $2.4 million from 3 banks, promising repayment through increased HOA fees from expanded membership. The entire scheme hinged on rezoning our area into a luxury estate community to justify the loan payments. Without my property completing the development puzzle, Sloan's financial empire would collapse faster than a house of cards in a Texas tornado. I sat in my kitchen reading Wade's timeline, the bitter taste of realization filling my mouth. Sloan had borrowed against future HOA assessments, expecting to force me into membership within 6 months. The quarterly loan payments were due in 8 weeks. Without successful rezoning, she'd default on $2.4 million in loans plus her personal investments. Sloan wasn't harassing me for sport. She was fighting for her financial life. The political rot ran deeper than small-town incompetence. County Commissioner Bradley Moore wasn't just rubber stamping Sloane's permits. He was her brother-in-law. His construction company had pocketed $47,000 in no-bid HOA contracts for emergency improvements that conveniently required permits only he could approve. Wade documented 17 permit approvals that violated standard procedures, all benefiting Sloane's projects or Moore's business. During my construction days, I'd seen municipal corruption, but this was textbook racketeering, the kind federal prosecutors dream about. The insurance fraud was almost artistic. Sloane had systematically filed claims against 3 previous holdout neighbors, collecting $89,000 in settlements for property damage from hostile neighbors and psychological trauma from harassment. The insurers paid small claims rather than fight, not realizing they were funding a professional intimidation campaign. She'd been paid to terrorize her neighbors like some suburban mob boss. Environmental violations added federal teeth to the case. EPA records showed that the road construction had diverted protected wetland drainage without required assessments. Federal law carries $37,500 per day penalties until remediation, and violations can trigger criminal charges against the permit signers. Moore's signature was on every fraudulent environmental waiver. Back in my construction career, I'd heard prosecutors use the term RICO enterprise, an organized criminal operation using intimidation and fraud for financial gain. The Federal Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act was built for cases like Sloane's, with penalties including triple damages and 20-year prison sentences. Maya found me in the kitchen that evening, surrounded by Wade's evidence files, grinning like a man who'd just struck oil in his backyard. "You look different," she said, pouring herself coffee and settling beside me. "I feel different," I replied, organizing the documents that would end Sloane's empire. For the first time since this started, I'm not playing defense. The power dynamic had flipped. Sloane needed my cooperation to avoid financial ruin and federal prosecution. She just didn't know it yet. Knowledge is power, but organized knowledge is a weapon of mass destruction. That weekend, I transformed our garage workshop into what Maya lovingly called the war room. Maps covered every wall, legal documents hung from clotheslines like evidence in a crime show, and timelines sprawled across folding tables like D-Day invasion plans. Owen brought his military planning expertise and enough surveillance equipment to make the Pentagon jealous. Dr. Perez contributed legal research that would humble most law professors, plus medical documentation of stress-related symptoms caused by Sloane's harassment. Janet arrived with her teacher's organizational superpowers and enough color-coded folders to stock an office supply store. "This looks like either the most boring movie set or the most interesting garage sale in Texas," Maya quipped, sipping her morning coffee as she surveyed our command center. My first call went to Catherine Silver, Dallas's most feared property rights attorney. Catherine had a 94% win rate and a reputation for making opposing counsel cry during depositions. Her strategy was beautifully simple: file a simultaneous quiet title action and a federal environmental complaint the same day as the HOA's public hearing. "We'll shift the burden of proof to them while exposing the entire fraud," Catherine explained during our strategy session. "By the time they realize what's hit them, they'll be defending criminal charges instead of attacking your property rights." The evidence compilation took 3 days. Wade had assembled 847 photographs, 23 hours of video footage, and 156 documents proving systematic harassment and illegal property seizure. The timeline showed escalating criminal behavior that would make federal prosecutors salivate. Here's something most people don't understand about SLAPP suits: strategic lawsuits against public participation. They're legal actions designed to intimidate rather than win, using expensive litigation to silence opposition. Texas has strong anti-SLAPP laws, with mandatory attorney fee awards for victims. Sloane's harassment campaign met every textbook definition, which meant she'd be paying my legal bills by the time this was over. Catherine's financial warfare plan was particularly elegant. We filed an insurance claim against the HOA's liability policy for property damage, triggering an investigation into their coverage. When insurance companies discover fraudulent applications or undisclosed risks, they void policies retroactively, leaving board members personally liable for all judgments. Our public relations counterstrike launched that Tuesday. Janet helped Maya create a Facebook group called Briarwood Property Rights Alliance, sharing the real story behind Sloan's shell company acquisitions. Dr. Perez wrote detailed posts on HOA overreach and resident intimidation. Reads like academic papers, but hit like sledgehammers. Owen contributed his military perspective on proportional response and rules of engagement, explaining how Sloan's tactics violated basic principles of civilized conflict resolution. Within 48 hours, group membership grew to 127 residents, many sharing their own horror stories of HOA harassment and financial irregularities. My secret weapon was Jack Monroe, owner of Monroe Recovery Services. Jack specialized in HOA towing contracts and knew every player in the business. When I explained our situation, his weathered face split into a grin that could scare a rattlesnake. That woman owes my company $12,000 for unpaid towing services, Jack revealed, pulling out a thick stack of invoices. Been trying to collect for 8 months. You know what that means? I did indeed. Mechanics' liens take priority over most other debts and can force asset sales to satisfy contractor claims. Jack's unpaid bills created a legal claim against HOA common areas that could unravel Sloan's entire financial structure. Our neighborhood intelligence network expanded like a web of suburban spies. 5 neighbors volunteered as early warning systems, each monitoring a different front: HOA meetings, permit filings, construction activity, and social media chatter. Owen set up encrypted messaging using military-grade communication protocols that would make the NSA proud. Dr. Perez recruited allies on the City Planning Commission and school board, people who'd grown tired of Sloan's heavy-handed tactics and questionable ethics. The environmental documentation came from a professional wetland specialist who confirmed EPA violations serious enough to trigger a federal criminal investigation. Local investigative reporter Sarah Vega showed intense interest in the corruption angle. Her story pitch was irresistible. HOA president's secret business empire built on neighbor harassment and municipal fraud. Sarah, who'd won awards for exposing real estate corruption, agreed to hold publication until our legal filings were ready. The psychological profile Dr. Perez built was fascinating. Sloan showed classic signs of a narcissistic rage spiral, escalating aggression whenever her authority was challenged. The prediction was ominous. She'd likely escalate to property damage or physical confrontation before accepting defeat. We need to be ready for her to completely lose control, Dr. Perez warned during our final planning session. When narcissists face public humiliation, they often become dangerous. Catherine's legal trap was brilliant in its simplicity. We filed preliminary paperwork but didn't serve the HOA, creating the false impression I was backing down. That would encourage Sloan to become even more aggressive, hopefully committing crimes we could document before springing our coordinated legal, media, and enforcement response. That Thursday evening, I stood in our war room surrounded by evidence of Sloan's criminal enterprise, feeling like a general on the eve of battle. Maya squeezed my shoulder, grounding me in what really mattered. "Ready?" she asked softly. "More than ready," I replied, glancing over our battle plan. "It's time to end this." Sloan's desperation reached new heights that Tuesday night. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by the rumble of unmarked trucks creeping past our bedroom window. The acrid stench of fresh asphalt and diesel exhaust drifted through our air vents as a crew worked under portable floodlights, installing speed bumps and "no parking residents only" signs along what she now brazenly called community infrastructure. Owen's security cameras captured everything in crystal clear detail: license plates, faces, and Sloan herself directing traffic like some kind of suburban construction foreman. Her plan was obvious: create more permanent modifications, then argue my resistance proved I wasn't a real community member worthy of road access. The footage was pure comedy gold. Sloan, dressed in a pink tracksuit and designer sneakers, barking orders at 2 a.m. while porch lights flickered on across the neighborhood. She looked like a reality TV star having a very expensive meltdown. But her next move crossed a line even I didn't expect. Thursday afternoon, Maya was loading groceries when Sloan approached her in the school parking lot with the predatory smile of a used car salesman closing a deal. "Maya, sweetheart," Sloan purred, her voice dripping with false concern. "I know this situation's been stressful for your family. I'd like to offer $25,000 cash just for your inconvenience. If Caleb drops this ridiculous lawsuit." Maya, bless her, had the presence of mind to start recording on her phone. What she captured was priceless, Sloan admitting the money came from the Community Improvement Fund, which Wade had already proven was embezzled HOA dues. The woman was literally trying to bribe us with stolen money while confessing to financial crimes on camera. "Think about Nina's college fund," Sloan continued, oblivious to the recording. "This legal mess could drag on for years and cost you everything." Maya's reply deserved a standing ovation. "The only thing costing us everything is dealing with criminals who think private property is their personal piggy bank." Meanwhile, Wade's investigation into Commissioner Moore was bearing fruit. The building inspector who'd approved Sloan's permits had never even visited the site. Approvals were rubber-stamped by email using backdated digital signatures. When the state attorney general's office received Wade's documentation, they launched a formal investigation that promised to make Moore's life very uncomfortable. Sloan's harassment campaign escalated into psychological warfare, worthy of Cold War operatives. Anonymous flyers appeared on car windshields throughout Briarwood, claiming I ran an illegal business from home. False complaints flooded the fire marshal's office about hazardous materials storage. Apparently, my basic workshop tools now qualified as industrial equipment in Sloan's imagination. Someone even called Child Protective Services with bogus reports of unsafe living conditions, forcing Maya to take time off work for a home inspection that found absolutely nothing. The caseworker apologized profusely, explaining they were required by law to investigate all reports, no matter how ridiculous. Nina's college applications were delayed due to mysterious address verification issues that somehow only affected our household. The girl maintained straight A's while dealing with harassment that would break most adults. I was proud of her resilience even as my anger burned hotter every day. The property damage escalated that Friday night. I woke to find our mailbox destroyed by unknown vandals, though Owen's cameras clearly showed 2 HOA board members swinging a baseball bat at 3 a.m. My expensive landscaping had been poisoned with herbicide, leaving dead patches that spelled out "move" in dying St. Augustine grass. Garden hoses were slashed in multiple places, flooding our basement storage with 3 inches of muddy water. The final insult was paint thrown at our siding from the road, bright orange splashes visible from the subdivision entrance like some kind of suburban scarlet letter. The symbolism was obvious. Mark the troublemaker's house, so everyone knew who was causing problems. During my years in construction, I learned that when people resort to vandalism and intimidation, they're usually under serious time pressure. Sloan's increasingly desperate move suggested she was racing a deadline I didn't yet fully understand. The community itself was splitting like a dividing cell. Sloan's emergency HOA meeting to expel disruptive members devolved into a shouting match when Dr. Perez demanded financial transparency. Owen openly challenged the board's authority to fine residents for made-up violations. Janet's pointed questions about shell company expenditures reduced the treasurer to stammering nonsense. 3 more families formally withdrew from HOA membership, citing financial irregularities and systematic harassment. The exodus was accelerating as neighbors realized they could simply opt out of Sloan's dictatorship by refusing to pay assessments. Social media warfare hit a fever pitch. Fake accounts flooded comment sections with inflammatory lies about my family. Maya received private messages threatening her job and our safety. Nina was bullied at school by kids whose parents had swallowed Sloan's propaganda whole. But beneath the chaos, something beautiful was happening. Law enforcement was finally paying attention. The sheriff's deputy who witnessed our mailbox destruction filed an official report and requested increased patrols. He recognized several HOA supporters from previous domestic violence calls, which explained their comfort with intimidation tactics. Saturday evening, I stood on our back porch watching another security patrol cruise past our house, cigarette smoke drifting across our property line like territorial marking. Maya joined me, her hand slipping into mine in the dusk. "She's going to try something bigger," she said quietly. "I can feel it." "Good," I replied, thinking about Catherine's legal trap and Jack's tow trucks waiting in the shadows. Let her dig the hole deeper. Sloane's final gambit came disguised as community volunteerism. She organized what she called Community Action Day, a grassroots beautification project meant to bring neighbors together to restore proper property standards. The Facebook event page looked wholesome enough. Families working together to improve shared spaces, complete with promises of barbecue and lemonade. What the event description didn't mention was the real agenda. More than 20 neighbors armed with bolt cutters, sledgehammers, and enough righteous indignation to level a small building. Their mission was clear: tear out every survey marker, security camera, and private property sign on my land. Saturday morning arrived with the ominous rumble of pickup trucks and SUVs converging on our road like a suburban militia. The smell of gasoline from chainsaws and the metallic clank of tools being unloaded filled the air as Sloane's volunteers prepared for what she euphemistically called emergency community maintenance. I'd been anticipating this escalation for weeks. Owen positioned himself strategically with video equipment while Wade coordinated with the sheriff's department. Maya and Nina were safely visiting Maya's sister in Austin. No reason for them to witness what was about to unfold. Sloane emerged from her BMW like a general inspecting troops, clipboard in hand and bolt cutters gleaming in the morning sun. She'd even brought matching t-shirts reading Briarwood Pride for her demolition crew. The woman had turned property destruction into a team-building exercise. "Morning, neighbors," she called out cheerfully, her voice carrying across the property line with rehearsed real estate enthusiasm. "Ready to bring this corner of our community up to proper standards?" The crowd cheered like they were at a tailgate party instead of preparing to commit felony trespass and vandalism. Watching grown adults get ready to destroy private property while wearing matching outfits was surreal enough to make Salvador Dali jealous. That's when I walked out with my video camera, and the sheriff's deputy Owen had quietly summoned. Deputy Alvarez was a no-nonsense veteran who'd been documenting Sloane's escalating behavior for weeks. His presence instantly transformed the cheerful demolition party into an awkward standoff. "Folks need to step back from the property line," Alvarez announced, his hand resting casually on his radio. "This is private land, and you're currently trespassing." Sloane's response was pure theater. She clutched her bolt cutters like a weapon and screamed about harassment of tax-paying citizens, while her volunteers shuffled nervously behind her. The woman even accused the deputy of being in Caleb's pocket, apparently forgetting that questioning law enforcement integrity in Texas is generally a poor life strategy. "This man is destroying our community," she shrieked, pointing the bolt cutters at me like a deranged orchestra conductor. "We have every right to protect our property values." Deputy Alvarez's patience had its limits. When Sloan stepped onto my land with cutting tools while screaming threats, he'd seen enough. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed across the sudden silence as two of her most enthusiastic volunteers joined her in being cited for criminal trespass. But here's where Sloan's media strategy spectacularly imploded. She'd called a local TV news crew expecting a sympathetic piece about community improvement, being blocked by a selfish neighbor. Instead, they filmed her being arrested while holding bolt cutters and ranting about property rights. Reporter Sarah Vega, who had been quietly investigating our story for weeks, interviewed both sides, but focused her questions on environmental violations and municipal corruption. Sloan's on-camera meltdown included admissions about forcing property sales and bringing non-conforming neighbors into compliance that would make federal prosecutors giddy. Footage of her supporters vandalizing private property while wearing matching t-shirts was comedic gold. Nothing says grassroots movement like coordinated uniforms and professional demolition gear. Sloan spent 72 hours in county jail because her bond was set at $50,000 and her accounts were frozen pending a fraud investigation. Her mugshot aired on the evening news alongside Sarah's expose on systematic HOA corruption and environmental crimes. The woman who'd spent 3 years terrorizing neighbors was finally getting the public attention she always craved. The financial collapse of her empire accelerated like dominoes in an earthquake. Banks froze her shell company accounts pending fraud reviews. 3 families received foreclosure notices on properties managed by her development partnerships. The HOA's insurance provider canceled its policy due to criminal activity exclusions, leaving board members personally liable for all judgments. Meanwhile, Janet's investigation uncovered the final smoking gun. Sloan had embezzled $127,000 from the Community Improvement Fund to make loan payments on her failing property investments. The annual HOA audit had been performed by her brother-in-law's accounting firm, which explained how the theft had gone unnoticed for 2 years. 15 families demanded an emergency board meeting to elect new leadership. Dr. Perez was nominated as president by acclamation, while Owen and Janet agreed to serve on the new Financial Oversight Committee. The new board's first act was to issue formal apologies to harassment victims and implement full financial transparency measures. The federal investigation shifted into high gear when the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit opened a case based on EPA referrals. Grand jury subpoenas were issued for 3 years of HOA financial records, shell company bank statements, and all communications between Sloan and Commissioner Moore. That evening, I stood in our restored, peaceful backyard, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. The constant rumble of traffic was gone, replaced by birdsong and the distant laughter of children playing in properly supervised areas. Maya squeezed my hand, her wedding ring catching the last light. "It's really over, isn't it?" she asked softly. "Almost," I replied, thinking about Jack Monroe's tow trucks positioned strategically around the subdivision. One more surprise for anyone still backing her criminal operation. The federal courthouse in downtown Dallas was packed like a championship football stadium. Sloan Whitaker's sentencing hearing had drawn over 200 community members, investigative reporters, and federal prosecutors who had built their case around the meticulous evidence Wade and I had compiled. The marble hallways echoed with nervous whispers and the clicks of news cameras as people filed into Judge Patricia Monroe's courtroom. I sat in the front row with Maya and Nina, surrounded by the allies who had become true friends through this ordeal. Owen wore his dress uniform. Dr. Perez clutched a folder of medical testimony, and Janet had organized a support group of 12 other families who had suffered under Sloan's reign of terror. The air smelled like a mix of nervous sweat and expensive lawyer cologne. Judge Monroe entered with the solemn gravity of someone about to pronounce judgment on organized crime. Federal prosecutors had presented 847 pieces of evidence over 3 days, including every photo, video, and document Wade and I had assembled during months of harassment. Sloan's court-appointed attorney looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. The victim impact statements began with Maya describing the workplace intimidation and threats against our family. Her voice was steady, as she explained how Sloan had weaponized her career and terrorized our teenage daughter. The emotional weight in that courtroom was heavy enough to cut with a knife. Dr. Perez testified about stress-related medical treatment required by multiple residents who had been systematically harassed. Owen presented his military perspective on proportional response, explaining how Sloan's tactics violated the basic principles of civilized conflict resolution. 12 other families shared similar accounts of intimidation, financial extortion, and property rights violations. The pattern was undeniable. Sloan hadn't just targeted me. She had been running a criminal operation designed to pressure homeowners into selling their properties below market value. When Sloan's turn came to speak, her lawyer attempted a plea for leniency, citing financial desperation and community pressure. But Sloan couldn't help herself. She interrupted with a rambling speech about property values and community standards that sounded like a broken real estate advertisement. "Your Honor, I was protecting innocent families from hostile neighbors who refused to follow reasonable guidelines," she declared, her voice rising with each word. "These people wanted to drag down everyone's investments with their selfish behavior." Judge Monroe let her ramble for 15 minutes before cutting her off. Watching Sloan rant about property values while facing federal prison was like watching someone complain about a parking ticket during a murder trial. The evidence was devastating. Catherine Silver's timeline showed systematic criminal conduct, escalating from harassment to property destruction to environmental violations. Security footage played on courtroom monitors showing vandalism, intimidation, and midnight construction. Financial records revealed $340,000 in embezzled funds. The environmental expert testified about permanent ecological damage caused by illegal wetland diversion. Federal law treats environmental crimes seriously, especially when combined with municipal corruption and racketeering. The prosecution built an airtight case that will likely be used as a textbook example for future prosecutors. Judge Monroe's explanation of criminal forfeiture was music to my ears. Sloan would surrender all property purchased with the proceeds of her crimes, including her home, investment properties, and the BMW that had already been repossessed. The forfeited assets would be used to compensate victims and fund environmental restoration. When the judge announced an 8-year federal sentence, the courtroom erupted in applause that echoed off the marble walls. Sloan's face drained of color as the reality of federal prison hit her. Commissioner Moore had already received 5 years in a separate trial, and 3 city officials were pleading guilty for reduced sentences. The media coverage was immediate and widespread. Sarah Vega's live broadcast reached 2.3 million viewers across Texas, detailing how one homeowner's documentation had exposed municipal corruption and environmental crime. National networks picked up the story as an example of HOA abuse and citizen advocacy triumph. The environmental victory exceeded even my wildest hopes. Federal court ordered $2.1 million in wetland restoration, funded by criminal forfeiture. My property would become the northern boundary of a new protected wildlife corridor. The EPA announced plans to use our case as a model for prosecuting future environmental crimes tied to municipal corruption. The property rights precedent was equally significant. Ridgway v. Briarwood Commons HOA would be cited in law schools and courtrooms nationwide. The Texas legislature was already drafting the Property Owner Protection Act based on our case. Judge Monroe's closing remarks carried the weight of constitutional authority. This case represents everything wrong with unchecked power and systematic neighbor harassment. Mr. Ridgway's patience and documentation saved this community from years more abuse. Let this sentence serve as a warning. Property rights are not negotiable in America. The financial reckoning was swift and brutal. Civil lawsuit settlements awarded me $480,000 in damages and attorney fees. RICO treble damages were applied to all documented harassment and property destruction. The HOA's insurer paid additional environmental restoration costs. As federal marshals led Sloan away in handcuffs, she was still claiming she'd been protecting property values. Her last words to the media were predictably childish. "This is all his fault," she yelled, pointing at me like a kid caught stealing cookies. Outside the courthouse, Maya and I stood in the afternoon sun surrounded by friends and neighbors who had stood with us against organized crime disguised as community governance. The sweet taste of justice was better than any victory I'd experienced in my construction career. "Ready to go home?" Maya asked, squeezing my hand. "More than ready," I replied, thinking of the peaceful gravel road waiting for us. "Let's go celebrate freedom." Justice tastes sweetest when shared with those who deserve it most. That's why I donated $200,000 of the settlement to establish the Briarwood Veteran Scholarship, a fund providing college assistance for military families in our community. Maya was appointed to the scholarship board alongside Dr. Perez and Owen, turning our alliance of necessity into a partnership for positive change. The first scholarship recipient was the son of a neighbor who had supported us through the ordeal. Watching that young man receive his check while his veteran father wiped away tears at our community center reminded me why this fight had been worth every sleepless night and legal bill. The environmental restoration exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 6 months, workers completed the wetland rehabilitation ahead of schedule and under budget. The restored Miller's Creek now supports returning wildlife, including rare painted buntings that hadn't been seen in our region for decades. Their morning songs drift across our property like nature's own victory anthem, replacing the diesel roar of Sloan's construction crews. My gravel road became part of the restoration plan, designated as a low-impact nature trail connecting the subdivision to the new wildlife preserve. Families now stroll with their children along the same path Sloan had tried to steal, learning about environmental protection and property rights from educational signs funded by her criminal forfeiture money. The irony is delicious. Nina received a full scholarship to the University of Texas engineering program after her essay about standing up to bullies and protecting what's right won a statewide writing contest. She wants to specialize in environmental engineering, inspired by watching our wetland restoration process unfold. Maya's promotion to assistant superintendent came with district-wide recognition for her leadership during our crisis. The family vacation to Alaska we'd postponed during the legal battle was finally funded by documentary appearance fees. Watching grizzly bears fish for salmon while Nina planned her college courses felt like the perfect reward for surviving suburban warfare. Maya's laughter echoing across pristine wilderness was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. Property values told the real story of our victory. Our home's value jumped 45% following the corruption exposure and environmental restoration. Neighboring properties appreciated as well, thanks to proximity to the protected wildlife corridor. The area even rebranded itself as Briarwood Conservation Community, a name that actually meant something beyond real estate marketing. The legal reforms our case inspired became the Texas Property Owner Protection Act, signed into law with bipartisan support. The legislation requires HOAs to carry $2 million in liability insurance for officer misconduct, establishes a state ombudsman's office for property rights disputes, and criminalizes harassment campaigns targeting individual homeowners. Sloan's criminal legacy became the foundation for protecting future families. Jack Monroe's towing business grew 300% after publicity from our case, specializing in HOA accountability services that make corrupt boards sweat. Sarah Vega's Emmy-winning documentary, Neighborhood Nightmare, was watched by 15 million households and inspired property rights legislation in 12 states. The community transformation was remarkable. Dr. Perez was elected HOA president with 89% of the vote, implementing transparent governance and publishing monthly budgets online. Annual dues dropped from $2,400 to $400 per household after eliminating corruption and kickbacks. Owen and Wade formed a private investigation firm that has since helped 37 families fight HOA abuse across Texas. 3 families who nearly lost their homes to Sloan's foreclosure schemes used restitution payments to save their properties. The community center built in Sloan's former house now hosts conflict resolution training, turning criminal real estate into a force for community good. Our 3rd annual Freedom Road Festival last month drew over 500 attendees from across the state to celebrate the power of standing up to bullies. The smell of barbecue smoke and the sound of children's laughter filled the air, as families enjoyed bounce houses set up exactly where Sloan's security guard once harassed visitors. As I write this, Maya and I are planning a semi-retirement that might include consulting for families facing similar HOA harassment. Wade is already investigating corruption in 3 other Texas neighborhoods, and we joke about starting a traveling roadshow for property rights education. The sound of children playing on our restored gravel road during the festival perfectly captures what we've fought to protect, their laughter blending with bird song from the protected wetlands, exactly as we dreamed when we first bought our little piece of American freedom. Got your own HOA nightmare story? Share it in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear they're not alone in this fight. And don't forget to subscribe to HOA Stories for more David versus Goliath property rights victories. Next week, I'll tell you about Margaret Turner, the 72-year-old grandmother in Oregon who used a medieval property law called adverse possession to seize her corrupt city council's parking lot. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well and keeping detailed records. Fueled by the satisfaction of community leadership and the sweet scent of desert mornings free of diesel fumes, remember this: patience and persistence always defeat petty tyrants, especially when you document everything. Your HOA dues aren't their personal piggy bank, and renewable energy installations are protected by law in most states. Drop a comment with your worst HOA horror story. And don't forget to subscribe to HOA Stories for more tales of neighborhood justice and Karen comeuppance.